Okay, so the real disconnect came back and said, but Gwenda, what about when Irenaeus said the very ancient and universally known church founded and organized at Rome by the two most glorious apostles, Peter and Paul, also as the faith preached to men, which comes down to our time by means of the successions of the bishops, for it is a matter of necessity that every church should agree with this church on account of its preeminent authority. That is, the faithful everywhere, inasmuch as the apostolic tradition has been preserved continuously by those faithful men who existed everywhere. And your citation is Irenaeus Against Heresies, Book 3, Chapter 3. Now, really, you should be asking me this question, not, you should leave Gwenda alone, because I'm sure that Gwenda would not be familiar with the writings of the church fathers, nor should she have to worry about that. You see, because the church fathers were just bishops. That's what they were. And even Ignatius wrote that they didn't have the same authority as the apostles did. So this idea of apostolic succession, again, that's not a concept that he himself nor any other early church father actually had. The church fathers were not inspired, nor were their writings inspired, nor did they believe themselves to be inspired. So the fact that you're quoting them as if they were inspired, I mean, that's crazy. And again, this is a problem that I have with Roman Catholics and also the Eastern Orthodox folk, because you guys act like their writings are inspired scripture and on the same level as inspired scripture when it's not. Now, in addressing this quotation from Irenaeus, Irenaeus also believed that Jesus died in his 50s. Are we to accept that as well? Should we just, is that established doctrine as well? Or is it just bad history? Irenaeus had great theology. He had outstanding theology and Christology, and theology proper, but his history was not good. This wouldn't be the only historically inaccurate quote coming from Irenaeus. So this is why I said we can respect the church fathers for defending the faith the way that they did with such little revelation in comparison to what we have today. We can respect what they did to defend the faith and the context and the time in which they live. But we don't have to accept everything that they said, especially when they believed that dogma was passed down from Jesus and from the apostles. This is why I always bring it back to the New Testament, because the New Testament have the teachings of the apostles and also the words of Jesus. And some people, the Eastern Orthodox, will bring up the Didache, but it should also be noted that the Didache, even though it's called the teachings of the 12 apostles, it's not confirmed that it actually came from the 12 apostles. That's just a tradition that was handed down. It's not verified as really coming from them. Gives us some good insight as to the early church, the first century church practices, but we don't have to live by the Didache as if it's inspired scripture. Now, regarding this quotation, sorry, I got off on a tangent. Regarding this quotation, let me read you a little bit from this web blog right here. Notice what it says at the bottom of this book right here. The Irenaeus of Lyons, from Eric Osborne. In this definitive work on Irenaeus, the city of Rome is not even mentioned. So Jerry, as in Jerry Walls, whoever wrote the original comment in the Facebook group, says Jerry referred them to Peter Lamb. Someone else commented that if you don't have a succinct answer, you probably don't have an answer. Well, here's a succinct response that I posted. A couple of things about Irenaeus, quote, for those who wanted a succinct answer, Jerry mentioned Peter Lamb. From Paul to Valentinus, Lamb studied every scrap of paper, including Romans 16, 1 Clement, Justin, as in Justin Martyr, Shepherd of Hermas, etc. Every inscription, every archaeological find, every cemetery in ancient Rome, and determined that there was a network of small churches led by groups of elders. That's facts. There was no one successor of Peter for 150 years or more. So it's a broken, fabricated succession. Bottom line on Irenaeus, he was a bad historian, relying on anachronism. So do you know what anachronism is? Anachronism is when you look at history and you determine that it was back then the same way things are today, which is not good history. It's a very inaccurate look at history. And when you don't travel around as much, you know what I'm saying, or when you become divorced from a particular culture, you tend to see things the way that things look around you. And apparently that was a common thing in the mid second century. So it wasn't unique to Irenaeus. He says the church was founded by Peter and Paul, but there were more likely churches in Rome immediately following Pentecost, many years before Peter and Paul ever got there. That's facts. Paul arrived to existing churches there maybe 25 to 28 years later, and there was no mention of Peter. Fables that Peter was the first bishop of Rome and ruled there for 25 years have also been found to be contradictory to accounts in Acts. Right. Why don't we see anything like that in the letter to the Romans? Why don't we see anything like that in the or the foundations of that in the book of Acts? That's when we know that they went to Rome to die, to be martyred. We do know that from the Bible. But we don't know nothing about him starting a church there, only that he wrote to the churches there. And we know from Eusebius that at least Peter was there preaching the gospel, and that's where Mark decided to start writing down the gospel as he was preaching it. That story made its appearance in the third century, but it sounded good to later bishops of Rome, and so therefore it was repeated ad nauseum. Yeah, so that's how the tradition began. It was just hearsay. It was just a myth, a fable that was told and retold. Irenaeus may have had good theology, but that's because he was also among the first to have an almost totally compiled New Testament. It wasn't the Catholic Church that put it together. Paul's works were most likely collected in his own lifetime. The Gospels and other letters were also collected in a group, but there was no doubt they were regarded as scripture from the moment the ink was dry. Even Peter said in his letter that the untaught, the unlearned, they twist Paul's writings as they do the rest of scripture. So even Peter believed that Paul's writings were scripture. You won't hear none of that talk in regards to the church fathers or their writings. I'm not going to finish reading the article because I think you guys get the point. But if you guys care to look it up for yourself, it was at this website. This is triablog.blogspot, I want to say .com. Or you can just Google search Triablog debunking papal succession. So anyways, I'll just leave you with this. You were quick to respond to Gwenda's comment, but you didn't want to respond to the video in which it's tagging you. It's addressed specifically to you, which was answering your comment that you gave to me. Don't go after them, the viewers and the commenters. Come after me. Come after me. Challenge me on this stuff. Not the people who are just watching the videos and learning from the videos. Come to the person who's actually teaching the information. You know, before I end this video, there's one more thing I wanted to point out about that quote. Look at this. The author of the blog says, even the Latin translation is questioned because Irenaeus originally wrote in Greek, but that is lost. We only have it in fragments or what's remaining of it. And so any doctrines that consider this to be a foundational text ought to be questioned. So even you asking my subscriber about that should be questioned, especially something that Roman Catholics consider as important as the papacy. So we're not doing that over here, man. We're not doing that over here. The church fathers give us great insight into how they defended the faith without a completed canon or not without an established canon. It's interesting that they were so close to the apostles, you know what I'm saying, or during the time of the apostles. All that's great, but that doesn't make them inspired, and that doesn't make them authoritative on the same level as the apostles.